like you belong in economy.
This is my assigned seat.
Move to economy while we verify this.
Verify the ticket before judging me. Who are you? I own this airline.
Please tell me that is not real.
Get out of that seat. The words struck the first-class cabin before the aircraft door had even closed. Adrian Cole looked up slowly from his phone. His coffee rested untouched on the wide armrest. Beside it lay a clean boarding pass with one clear assignment. Seat 1 across the aisle. A conversation stopped. A newspaper lowered. Somewhere near the galley, a glass clicked against a silver tray. Standing over Adrian did not seem to notice the sudden silence. The woman, Victoria Langley, was 48, polished from her pearl earrings to the cream jacket fitted perfectly around her shoulders. Her silver hair was cut in a smooth bob. Her handbag carried the quiet shine of something expensive. She looked like a woman who had spent years entering a room where people stepped aside before she had to ask. Now she pointed toward the aisle. "You need to move," she said. Assyrian studied her face for a moment. Not angry. Not yet. Just certain. "I believe this is my seat," he said. His voice was low and steady. Victoria gave a short laugh. There was no humor in it. "No, this is my seat. I always sit here." Adrian glanced at the boarding pass beside his coffee, then back at her. "My ticket says 1A." Victoria's eyes moved over him. Slowly, the charcoal hoodie, the dark jeans, the worn brown shoes, the simple watch on his wrist. Nothing about him announced wealth. Nothing begged to be recognized. That was intentional. At 52, Adrian had learned that power often revealed more when it remained hidden. People became careful when they knew who was watching. They smiled differently. They chose better words. They remembered the rules. But when they believed no one important was present, the truth came out. Victoria's gaze stopped on his face. "You must have read it wrong," she said. "First-class boarding can be confusing." A man in the second row shifted in his seat. His wife turned her head toward the window, pretending not to listen. Adrian felt the old pressure settle beneath his ribs. He had felt it in hotel lobbies, private clubs, corporate dining rooms, places where people looked past him and searched for the person they assumed was in charge. He had built an entire career without allowing that pressure to control him. So he did what he had always done. He slowed his breathing. "I read it correctly," he said. "You can check yours." Victoria's mouth tightened. Behind her, passengers continued entering the cabin. Suitcases rolled over the narrow floor. A child complained about a missing tablet. A gate agent called for people to keep moving. The normal sounds of boarding pressed against the tension in the first row. Victoria did not move. Instead, she leaned closer. Her perfume reached him before her words did. "People like you usually fly economy." The sentence was quiet. That made it worse. It was not shouted in anger. It was delivered like a fact she believed everyone already understood. Adrian looked directly into her eyes. The cabin seemed to shrink. A woman across the aisle froze with her seatbelt halfway fastened. A younger passenger 2 rows back lowered his phone, then raised it again at a slightly different angle. Adrian noticed. Victoria did not. "People like me?" Adrian asked. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Only for a second, then she recovered. "People who make scenes over simple mistakes. As I have not made a scene, you are sitting in a seat that does not belong to you." Adrian reached for his boarding pass. He lifted it between 2 fingers and turned it toward her. The printed number was large enough to read from several feet away. 1A, he said. "My name is Adrian Cole. This is my assigned seat." Victoria barely glanced at the paper. Her eyes returned to his hoodies. That small choice told him everything. She did not distrust the ticket. She distrusted the person holding it. Adrian had spent more than 3 decades watching people confuse appearance with values. He knew how quickly an assumption could become an accusation. How an accuracy in the wrong hands could become a weapon. How policy in the wrong hands could become a weapon. He also knew that dignity was easiest to talk about when no one was trying to take it from you. Victoria placed one manicured hand on the top of his seat. "You are delaying everyone." "No," Adrian said. "I am sitting quietly." A few passengers looked toward the galley now, waiting for a flight attendant. Victoria followed their eyes and raised her voice. The words traveled through the cabin. "A flight attendant front ones." Victoria straightened at once, softened, her shoulders lowered. Her expression softened. In less than a breath, she changed from aggressor to offended customer. Adrian watched the transformation with a sadness that surprised him. Some people did not lie because they feared the truth. They lied because experience had taught them. The room would believe them. The flight attendant started toward them. Victoria looked down at Adrian again, confidence returning. You should move before this becomes embarrassing. Adrian folded his boarding pass once and placed it carefully on the armrest. Then he met her gaze. There has been a mistake, he said. The crew can check both tickets. Victoria's jaw tightened. That is unnecessary. It is the simplest solution. Just move. Adrian remained seated. His hands stayed open. His posture stayed relaxed. But something in his eyes had changed. He was no longer hoping the situation would correct itself. He was observing it, every word, every look, every decision. His phone vibrated once inside his pocket. A message waited on the screen from the Sterling Crown Airlines board. The confidential customer dignity review is active. No employees have been notified. Adrian did not reach for the phone, not yet. The flight attendant was only a few steps away. Victoria smiled as if help had finally arrived. She had no idea the quiet man in the hoodie was the chief executive officer of the airline, and Adrian had no intention of revealing it until everyone in that cabin had shown him exactly who they were. The flight attendant stopped beside Victoria with a tablet pressed against her ribs. Her name tag read Rachel Moore. She was 35, with blonde hair pulled into a neat ponytail and the careful smile of someone trained to calm difficult passengers before they became official problems. But the moment her eyes moved from Victoria's cream jacket to Adrian's hoodie, saw it. The smile changed. On Victoria saw me tight, and Victoria saw it too, and Victoria relaxed. Thank goodness, she said, placing one hand against her chest. This man is sitting in my seat and he refuses to move. Rachel looked at Adrian, not at the boarding pass. At him, his worn shoes, his dark jeans, the plain hoodie, the coffee on the armrest, then back to Victoria, who stood polished and offended, as if she had already been wronged. Sir, Rachel said, may I see your boarding pass? Adrian lifted it without argument. Of course. Rachel took it and glanced down. The number was clear. 1A. The name was clear, Adrian Cole. She held it for less than 2 seconds. Then she looked toward the aisle behind them where boarding had slowed and passengers were beginning to stack up with bags in their hands. There may be some confusion, she said. There is no confusion, Adrian replied. That is my assigned seat. Victoria gave a sigh. Got here. He has been difficult since I got here. Adrian turned his eyes toward her. He said nothing. He understood something many people never learned. A lie often grew stronger when the person telling it believed the room had already chosen a side. Rachel shifted her weight. Are you all right? The question landed hard. Adrian felt it. So did the woman across the aisle whose hand stopped halfway toward her seatbelt. Victoria's expression softened at once. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes widened, she said. I am shaken. I fly this route all the time. I have never been treated this way. Adrian watched her perform pain with the ease of someone who had practiced being believed. Rachel handed the boarding pass back to him. Sir, I understand what the ticket says, but we may need to verify it in the system. Please do. That should have ended the problem. A scan, a name check, a seat assignment, less than a minute. But Rachel did not move toward the galley computer. She stayed in the aisle, blocking him, blocking the seat, blocking the truth from becoming official. Victorian can print something at home, she said. People fake documents all the time now. A man in the row behind them lowered his newspaper completely. That's a boarding pass, he said quietly. Rachel turned toward him. Sir, please let us handle this. He was in his late 60s, white-haired, wearing a navy blazer over a pale blue shirt. His wife touched his wrist, asking him without words not to get involved. He looked at her hand, then at Adrian, then back at Rachel. Handling it would mean checking the ticket, Rachel's sighed. I don't believe you to know, the cabin said. I don't believe you do. The cabin shifted, not loudly. People sat straighter. Phones appeared near laps and coat pockets. Seat saw the camera near the window, held hers. At chest level, the camera pointed. Adrian noticed her hands trembling. Rachel noticed too. Please stop recording, she said. The young woman did not lower the phone. Victoria looked around, offended by the attention. This is becoming ridiculous. I paid for first-class comfort, not a public debate. Adrian looked at Rachel. Are you asking me to leave my seat before you verify it? Rachel's cheeks colored. I am asking you to cooperate with the boarding process. With what exactly? With keeping the aisle clear. I was seated until Miss Langley stood over me. Victoria scoffed. Now he is blaming me for the delay. Adrian felt the temperature of the cabin differently now. The air conditioning was cold, but heat had begun to gather under his collar. He thought of his father, who had worked maintenance shifts in Detroit for 30 years. A man who came home with grease under his fingernails and still polished his shoes before church every Sunday. Never let another person's blindness decide who you are, his father used to say. Adrian had carried that lesson into boardrooms, negotiations, and hostile meetings. Now he carried it into seat 1A. Rachel lowered her voice. Sir, economy boarding is still open. We can seat you temporarily in the rears while we sort this out. The words were quiet, but everyone nearby heard them. Adrian stared at her. You want me to move to economy? Temporarily. From a first-class seat assigned to me until we confirm the record. You are holding the record in your hand. Rachel's jaw tightened. Please do not make this harder than it needs to be. The sentence hung in the cabin. Adrian felt the old machinery begin to move. First, doubt him, then question his tone, then make his resistance the problem. He placed both hands on the armrests and stood slowly. No sudden movement. No raised voice. His shoulders filled the narrow aisle, but his hands remained open. Rachel took half a step back. Victoria's expression changed. She had not expected him to be so tall. I will step into the aisle so you can verify the seat, Adrian said, but I am not giving it up. For 1 second, no one spoke. Then Victoria reached past him. Her fingers closed around the boarding pass on the armrest. She lifted it toward her face, glanced at it, and laughed. This is absurd. Adrian turned. Please do not touch my things. Victoria tossed the pass toward his lap. It struck his thigh and slid onto the seat. Then her elbow hit the coffee cup. Maybe it was not, but she did not apologize. The cup tipped. Dark coffee spilled across the folded newspaper, splashed over Adrian's jeans, and ran toward the floor. A gasp moved through the cabin. The heat struck his skin. Adrian flinched, only once. Victoria stepped back. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said. Now he is making a scene. The young woman with the phone raised it higher. The older man in the navy blazer stood halfway from his seats. Rachel looked down at the spreading coffee, then at Adrian, then at Victoria. She had a choice. Everyone could feel it. A simple choice. Ask what happened. Check the seat. Tell the truth. Instead, Rachel lifted her tablet and spoke into the cabin phone. Cabin manager to first class, she said. We have a passenger dispute at seat 1A. Adrian looked at her. His jeans were wet. His sporting spets was stained. His coffee dripped from the edge of the seat. Still stopped being a dispute and calm. This stopped being a seat dispute that you decided I was the problem. Before checking the facts, at the front of the aircraft, footsteps approached. Measured. Confident. Official. Victoria sat down in the empty seat behind Adrian and crossed her legs as though the outcome had already been decided. Adrian reached into his pocket. His phone screen lit up. A message from the board waited for him. Continue the review, document everything. He turned the phone face down. Then he looked toward the approaching cabin manager. The airline was still being tested, and so far it was failing. Thomas Grant moved through the first-class cabin with the controlled pace of a man who believed calm authority could settle almost anything. He was 44, dressed in a dark navy supervisor jacket. His expression was already set before he reached seat 1A. Not curious. Prepared. Rachel met him halfway and lowered her voice, but the cabin had become so quiet that several passengers still heard every word. Seating dispute, she said. The passenger claims 1A belongs to him. Miss Langley says it is her regular seat, is refusing to cooperate. Thomas looked past her, first at Victoria, then at Adrian. That order mattered. Victoria sat upright in the seat behind Adrian's. Its one-hand resting jacket was spotless. Her purse sat neatly beside her. She looked composed, respectable, and wounded. Adrian stood in the aisle with coffee soaking through his jeans. To a careless observer, he looked like the source of the disorder. Thomas stepped closer. Sir, I need you to lower your voice and cooperate with the crew. Adrian stared at him. My voice has not been raised. Thomas blinked. Rachel shifted beside him. He has been argumentative. Adrian looked at her. I asked you to verify my boarding pass. Thomas extended his hand. Let me see it. Adrian reached toward the seat. The paper was damp now, one corner stained brown. He picked it and Thomas studied it longer than Rachel had. His eyes stopped on the seat number, 1A, then the name. Adrian Cole. Something moved across his face, not recognition, uncertainty. It disappeared quickly. Do you have identification? Thomas asked. Adrian reached into his pocket slowly. Every movement was deliberate. He knew what happened when a black man moved too quickly around nervous authority. He knew how easily ordinary actions became threats in someone else's retellings. He removed his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Thomas compared the name that matched. The photograph matched. The seat matched. Behind them, the young woman continued recording. Her phone was held close to her chest now. Her breathing was shallow, but she did not stop. Thomas noticed. Passengers need to stop filming, he said, turns upon the combat. This is a private matter. The older man in the navy blazer looked up at him. It stopped being private when your employee tried to move him without checking the record. Thomas's eyes hardened. Sir, I am seated. Then let us do our jobs. The older man folded his hands over his newspaper. A faint murmur moved through the cabin. Thomas turned back to Adrian. Mr. Cole, your document appeared to be in order. Adrian waited. Thomas did not return them, but we still need to understand what happened here. Then ask what happened. Victoria stood immediately. I will tell you what happened. I arrived and found him in my seat. I tried to explain the mistake, and he became confrontational. Adrian looked at her coffee cup on the floor. My coffee is on my clothes. Victoria's face tightened. You knocked it over. The woman across the aisle spoke before she could stop herself. No, he did not. Every head turned. She was in her early 60s, short gray hair and a red scarf tucked into her coat. Her voice shook slightly, but she continued. She reached across him. The cup fell after she touched the armrest. Victoria stared at her. You were not paying 3 feet away. Rachel looked down at her tablet. Thomas's jaw tightened. The story was changing. Not because Titans had finally changed. Because witnesses had finally entered it. Adrian held out his hand. My identification, please. Thomas returned the license, but kept the boarding pass. We need to verify both assignments in the system. That is what I requested from the beginning. Rachel's cheeks flushed. Victoria lifted her chin. I always sit in 1A, eh? Thomas turned wide toward her. Miss Langley, may I see your boarding pass? For the first time, her confidence flickered. Only for a heartbeat. It is on my phone. Please open it. Victoria reached into her purse. Her fingers moved faster than before. She unlocked the screen, opened the Airline app, and angled the phone toward Thomas, not toward Adrian. Thomas leaned closer. Rachel looked over his shoulder. The silence sharpened. Adrian could hear the air system above them, the soft hum of the aircraft, the nervous tap of Victoria's fingernail against the edge of her phone. Thomas's eyes stopped. His jaw shifted. Rachel's lips parted. The seat displayed on Victoria's screen was not 1A. It was C. The truth sat there in plain digital text. No confusion, no system error, no question. Miss Langley, your assigned seat is 2C. Victoria pulled the phone back. That cannot be right. It is what the reservation shows. I always sit in 1A, not on flight. Her face reddened. The system must have changed it. I booked that seat months ago. Adrian looked across the aisle. Seat 2C was empty. It is available, he said. Victoria turned on him sharply. Do not speak to me as if we are equals. The sentence landed like a door slamming shut. Rachel froze. Thomas stopped breathing for a second. Even Victoria seemed to hear the cruelty only after it had left her mouth. The young woman's phone trembled. The older man lowered his newspaper completely. Adrian did not move. Something in his face became colder. Not rage, clarity. Thomas stepped toward Victoria. Miss Langley, you need to take your assigned seat. She looked at him in disbelief. You so are taking his side? I am following the seating record. Now you follow the record? Adrian asked. Thomas turned toward him. Mr. Cole, I understand this has been frustrating, but the issue is resolved. No. The word was quiet. Still, it cut through the cabin. Thomas' posture changed. Excuse me? Adrian took the damp boarding pass from his hand. You knew my documents were valid. She put her hands on me. She took my property. She spilled hot coffee on me. Your flight attendant looked at the evidence and decided I was the problem. Rachel swallowed. Thomas lowered his voice. Sir, we can discuss any service concerns after departure. Adrian, Malik, folded, stained sane pass once. No, you do not get to erase what happened because the seat number finally became inconvenient to ignore. The cabin went still. Adrian looked at Rachel, Toss, then Victoria. Every face was now fully visible. Every choice had been made in public. His phone vibrated again inside his pocket. This time, the message came from the airline's general counsel. Legal team ready. All records can be preserved immediately. Adrian did not reveal the screen. He simply looked at Thomas. But before this flight leaves the gate, he said, someone is going to explain why the truth only mattered after other passengers forced you to see it. Jason Miller arrived first. He was 29, broad through the shoulders with a polished uniform, and the restless energy of someone eager to prove he could handle pressure. Melissa Ward followed a few steps behind. At 41, she had spent nearly 2 decades in the air and carried that experience like armor. Thomas gave them a quick summary. Passengers conflict. Seat assignment is confirmed. We are trying to restore order. Trying to restore order. Adrian heard the phrase and felt its weight. Order, in rooms like this, often meant the person with less protection was expected to absorb the harm quietly. Jason looked at Adrian's wet jeans, then at Victoria seated in 2C. What is the issue now? He asked. The issue, Adrian said, is that your crew verified I was right and still wants to treat me like the problem. Jason's expression changed. Not much, but enough. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. Sir, no one is treating you like a problem. The older man in the navy blazer let out a quiet breath. Jason turned toward him. Something held his gaze. He has not raised his voice once. Melissa crossed her arms. Passengers do not need to involve themselves in crew matters. The woman in the red scarf looked at her. We became involved when your crew ignored what happened in front of us. Melissa's eyes moved across the cabin. More phones were visible now. A silver phone near the window, a black phone above a magazine. The young woman's camera held close to her chest. Her name was Madison Reed. She was 18, a freshman at a community college in Tennessee, flying home after spending a week with her aunt in Philadelphia. She had never and grow strangers. She avoided arguments, grocery susus. She changed lines when voices rose. But her thumb stayed on the screen. The live stream had climbed past several thousand viewers. Comments moved too fast to read. Check the ticket. Why are they still bothering him? Record everything. Madison's hands trembled. She did not stop. Thomas stepped closer to Adrian. Mr. Cole, we have acknowledged that the seat belongs to you. No, Adrian said. You acknowledged the number on the ticket. Thomas, the problem, a soft murmur paffrance. Satis through the cab, mistapted, sished, the batut. Adrian kept his voice level. You have not acknowledged that Miss Langley touched me. You have not acknowledged that she took my boarding pass. You have not acknowledged that she spilled hot coffee on me. And you have not acknowledged that your crew treated a valid ticket like a possible fraud because of the man holding it. Looked it down. Jason glanced toward Thomas, waiting for direction. Melissa stepped forward. Sir, at this point, you are creating a hostile environment. The sentence struck Adrian harder than he expected. Hostile. He stood still in soaked jeans while the woman who had insulted him sat comfortably in her assigned seat. And he was hostile. He thought of his father again. Not the lesson about blindness. Another one. Do not let people use your pain as proof against you. His father had said that after Adrian came home from high school with blood on his lip and anger in his chest. A teacher had blamed him for a hallway fight he had tried to stop. Adrian had been 17 then. He was 52 now. The lesson had not aged. Hostile, he repeated. Melissa lifted her chin. You're refusing to follow crew boarding. I stepped into the aisle when you asked. You continued to challenge the crew. I continued to describe what happened, Jason scoffed under his breath. Madison's phone captured it. Rachel heard it and looked away. Thomas heard. He did nothing. Adrian looked at Jason. Did you have something his weight? Jason sting to say. Jason, you got your seat back. I do not understand why you are dragging this out. The older man in the navy blazer closed his newspaper. Because getting the seat back does not undo what happened. Jason turned sharply. Sir, I have already asked you not to interfere. The man's wife touched his hand again. This time he squeezed hers. I am old enough to remember when people used the word order to justify a lot of ugly things, he said. I do not intend to sit quietly through another version of it. The cabin fell still. Melissa's face tightened. Thomas looked toward the boarding door. The line in the jet bridge had stopped completely. A gate agent stood at the entrance, watching with concern. The scheduled departure time was getting closer. Thomas wanted movement. He wanted the aisle clear. He wanted the cameras down. He wanted the story contained. He reached for the crew phone. Madison's breathing caught. Adrian watched him lift the handset. Gate security, Thomas said. We may need assistance in first class. The word security moved through the cabin like cold air. Victoria leaned back and to see a small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Adrian saw it. So did the woman in the red scarf. You are calling security on him? She asked. Thomas kept his eyes on Adrian. We are requesting assistance because the situation is escalating. It is escalating because you keep escalating it, she said. Melissa pointed toward the woman. Please remain seated. I am seated. More phones rose, not quickly. One by one, a businessman across the aisle raised his. An elderly woman near the window lifted hers. A middle-aged man behind Madison unlocked his screen and began recording. Thomas lowered the handset. All recording must stop. You are interfering with crew duties. Madison's face went. For 1 second, she almost lowered the phone. Then the older woman beside the man in the navy blazer raised her own device. No, she said, her voice was soft, but it carried. Let her record. Thomas stared at her. The woman held the phone higher. You can have my name if you need it. The businessman across the aisle spoke next. Mine, too. Another voice came from the second row. And mine. The cabin did not erupt. No one shouted. No one stood in the aisle. They simply refused to look away. Witness had become courage. Victoria looked around unsettled now. This is harassment, she said. I want all cessation. Adrian turned toward her. No one is harassing you. You are, with that tone, with this performance. Adrian looked down at the coffee stain spreading across his jeans, then back at her. This was not my performance. Victoria's mouth closed. Heavy footsteps sounded on the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door. One was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s. The other was a Korean-American woman with dark hair pulled back tightly and alert eyes that scanned the whole cabins before settling on anyone. They paused. They looked at the crew, the passengers, the raised phones, Victoria and 2C Adrian, standing beside 1A. The male officer stepped forward. Who called? I did, Thomas said. The female officer looked at him. What exactly is the disturbance? Thomas opened his mouth. For the first time since he entered the cabin, he did not have an answer ready. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped into the aisle and waited. He did not rush. He did not reach for Adrian. He simply looked at Thomas Grant and asked again, What is the disturbance? Thomas cleared his throat. The passenger has refused repeated crew instructions and disrupted boarding. Officer Hannah Kim moved past Daniel and scanned the cabin. Her eye stopped on a coffee stain across Adrian's jeans, then on the damp boarding pass in his hand, then on Victoria Langley seated upright in 2C with her purse clutched against her side. What instruction did he refuse? Hannah asked. Thomas hesitated. He refused to cooperate with a seating adjustment. Adrian looked at Daniel. My name is Adrian Cole. I was assigned to seat 1A. Miss Langley was sitting in it. Victoria leaned into the aisle. That is not what happened. Hannah turned toward her. Then tell me what happened. Victoria inhaled sharply. I always sit in 1A. I arrived and found him there. I tried to explain the mistake. He became aggressive. He blocked the aisle and made the crew uncomfortable. Madison's voice came from behind her phone. That is not true. Every face turned toward her. The phone shook in her hands, but she kept it raised. She told him people like him fly economy, Madison said. She took his boarding pass. She knocked over his coffee. He never raised his voice. Victoria stared at her. You are a child. You do not understand what you saw. Madison's face flushed. Hannah looked at the phone. Have you been recording from the beginning? Yes, Mom. Do not delete anything. Thomas stepped forward. Officer, these passengers are interfering with crew duties. Daniel looked at him. Right now they are witnesses. The sentence changed the room. Rachel lowered her eyes. Jason stopped shifting. Melissa's arms tightened across her chest. Daniel turned toward Adrian. Mr. Cole, may I see your boarding pass and identification? Adrian handed them over. No complaint, no sudden movement. Daniel studied the boarding pass carefully. He compared the name to the driver's license. He looked at the date, the flight number, the cabin, and the seat assignment. He took his time. That alone felt different. This shows first class, seat 1A, he said. Yes. Adrian toward Victoria. May I see your boarding pass? Victoria's lips parted. Thomas looked away. Rachel pressed her fingers against the edge of her tablet. Victoria unlocked her phone and handed it over with a stiff wrist. Seat 2C. Hannah read the screen, remained silent. Daniel handed Adrian's documents back to him. Then he looked at Thomas. So why was security called on Mr. Cole? Thomas's face changed, only slightly, but Adrian saw the muscles tighten near his jaw. Because he refused to let the matter end. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? We resolved the seat assignment. Miss Langley moved. Mr. Cole continued challenging the crew. Adrian looked at Thomas. I asked them to acknowledge what happened. Daniel turned toward him. What happened after the seats were verified? Adrian spoke slowly. Miss Langley had already taken my boarding pass. She had already put her hand on me. She had already spilled coffee on me. The crew had already suggested that I moved economy without checking the system. Rachel looked up. I said temporarily. You said it before you verified my ticket. Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Hannah looked at her. Why did you not verify it first? Rachel's face tightened. I thought there had been some confusion. Based on what? Rachel glanced at Adrian, then at Victoria, then at the cameras. The answer sat in her silence. Adrian did not rescue her from it. Some lessons needed the space to become visible. The older man in the navy blazer spoke. They believed the white woman before they checked anything. His wife placed one hand over his. He continued. They still treated him like the threat. Melissa stepped forward. That's his steps on. That is an unfair characterization. The woman in the red scarf turned toward her. I watched the whole thing. So did I, the businessman said. And I did, a nutser passenger added. The voices came from different rows. Older voices, younger voices, quiet voices. No one was shouting. That made them harder to dismiss. Victoria leaned into the aisle again. This is being blown completely out of proportion. I made a mistake about the seat. Adrian looked at her. You made several choices. Her eyes flashed. I did not know who you were. The words escaped before she could stop them. The cabin went cold. Adrian studied her face. And if I were nobody? Victoria blinked. If I were a retired teacher, a mechanic, a grandfather flying to see his family, would the way you treated me become acceptable? She looked toward Thomas for help. He did not move. Adrian's voice stayed calm. That is the question. No one here seems willing to answer. Hannah handed Victoria's phone back. Please remain in your assigned seat. Victoria's face reddened. I want to file a complaint. You may do that at the gate, Hannah replied. Right now, we are document Imaginer with a valid ticket was threatened with removal. Jason's head lifted. Madison spoke again. Yes, you did. Her voice cracked, but she continued. You called security after everyone knew the seat was as his. You have that on video? Yes, sir. Thomas exhaled through his nose. This is not a courtroom. Daniel turned toward him. No, but facts still matter. Adrian felt something shift inside the cabin. Not victory. Something more important. The possibility that truth might survive authority. He looked at Rachel. When I first showed you my ticket, why did you look at my clothes before you looked at the seat number? Rachel's eyes filled. I did not mean to question. She swallowed, her voice dropped. I made an assumption. The words were barely audible. Adrian heard them. So did everyone else. For the first time since Victoria had stood over him, someone from the crew had named the beginning of the harm, an assumption. Small word. Heavy damage. Adrian nodded once. That inside his pocket. He removed it slowly. The screen call from Evelyn Carter, General Counsel. Thomas caught the title beneath her name. His posture changed. Adrian answered, Yes, Evelyn. Her voice came through faintly, sharp and controlled. Are you still on the aircraft? I am. Do you want us to activate the executive response protocol? Thomas stared at him. Rachel's face drained. Jason looked toward Melissa. Adrian kept his eyes on Thomas. Not yet, he said. Begin preserving the passenger record, crew logs, security call, and all communications connected to this flight. No one moved, Adrian continued, and notify that the confidential customer dignity review has identified a serious failure. The silence became physical. Thomas's lips parted. Customer dignity review, Adrian ended the call. Then he looked around the cabin, at the crew, at the officers, at the passengers who had chosen to speak, at Victoria now watching him with a fear that had not existed minutes earlier. Adrian placed the phone back in his pocket. Yes, he said. A review. Thomas's voice came out thin. For whom? Adrian held his gaze. For the people who believe no one important is watching. Thomas Grant stared at Adrian as if the aisle had shifted beneath his feet. What exactly are you saying? He asked. Adrian did not answer right away. He reached into his hoodie pocket and unlocked his phone. His thumb moved across the screen with slow precision. No rush, no drama, just control. The airline application disappeared. A secure corporate portal opened in its place. Her posture changed. Officer Daniel Brooks leaned slightly closer. Officer Daniel Brooks leaned slightly closer. Thomas noticed their reaction before he saw the screen. That was when the color began to drain from his face. Adrian turned the phone toward him. The page was simple. Adrian Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Crown Airlines. Majority shareholder, executive authority active. Thomas's mouth opened. No sound came out. Rachel stepped back until her shoulder touched the seat beside her. Jason looked from the screen to Adrian, then toward the galley, as if someone might tell him this was a misunderstanding. Melissa's arms fell to her sides. Victoria stared at the phone, then at Adrian's coffee-stained jeans, then back at the phone. The man she had decided did not belong in first class. The company whose name was printed on every seat, every uniform, and every boarding pass around her. Adrian locked the screen. I am the chief executive officer of this airline, he said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The words moved through the cabin with the force of an announcement. A phone camera clicked softly. Someone behind Madison whispered, My God, Morsas. We were not aware, sir. I know, Adrian replied. That was the point. The truth landed hardest. Her eyes filled almost immediately. She remembered the pearls to Adrian's hoodie. The decision she had made before reading a single line on the ticket. Mr. Cole, she said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Marcus, take... Adrian looked at her. I believe you are sorry now. Rachel lowered her eyes. The sentence was not cruel. That made it worse. Thomas drew a slow breath and tried to recover the authority so it's worn easily only minutes before. Mr. Cole, if I had known your position with the company, this would have been handled differently. Adrian's expression hardened. That is not an apology. Thomas stopped. It is an explanation. No, it is the problem. The cabin went still again. Adrian looked around at the passengers who had been watched. Some still held their phones. Others had lowered them, but no one looked away. If I had been a retired schoolteacher, would I deserve less care? Thomas said nothing. If I had been a mechanic flying to his daughter's wedding, would the ticket matter less? Nothing. If I had no title at all, would it be acceptable to treat me like a fraud? Victoria shifted in her seat. I did not know who you were, she said. Adrian turned toward her, and that is exactly why this matters. She blinked. He stepped no closer. He did not need to. You think my identity changes what you did. It does not. My title did not make the seat mine. The boarding pass did. My position did not make the coffee burn. Your action did. And my company ownership does not make me worthy of respect. His voice slowed. My humanity does. The words settled over the cabin. Madison's eyes filled. The older man in the navy blazer bowed his head for a moment. His wife squeezed his hand. I made a mistake. Adrian held her gaze. You made several choices. She flinched. Thomas looked toward the open aircraft door. The gate agent stood there now, speaking quietly into a radio. Passengers remained backed up on the jet bridge. Departure was no longer the immediate concern. The incident was... Adrian turned to Hannah and Daniel. I would like both of you to remain until this is documented. Hannah nodded. Yes, sir. Thomas stepped forward. Mr. Cole, perhaps we should continue this conversation off the aircraft. Why? To avoid further embarrassment. For whom? Thomas's face reddened. For everyone involved. Adrian looked at his phones. The harm happened in public. His eyes returned to Thomas. The correction will not be hidden. Rage covered her mouth with one hand. Jason stared at the carpet. Melissa looked toward the galley, no longer annoyed, no longer certain. Shame had entered slowly, but now it sat heavily across her face. Adrian took out his phone again and called Evelyn Carter. She answered immediately. Evelyn Carter. Evelyn, Officers Brooks and Kim are present. The cabin manager and involved crew are still on board. I am recording the time, she said. How would you like to proceed? Adrian looked at Thomas. Place Thomas Grant, Rachel Moore, Jason Miller, and Melissa Ward on immediate administrative hold pending investigation. Rachel's shoulders shook once. Thomas's face went pale. Jason lifted his head. Sir, please, Thomas said. I understand how this looks. Adrian turned toward him. It does not look like anything. His voice sharpened. It is what happened. No one moved. Adrian continued into the phone. Preserve the crew logs, onboard messages, gate communications, and all security requests. No records are to be altered or deleted. Understood, Evelyn said. Notify their union representatives. Ensure they have access to counsel. This will be a formal investigation, not a public firing. Rachel lowered her hand. Surprise moved through her expression. Adrian saw it. Accountability had to be careful. Otherwise, it became revenge wearing professional language. Evelyn continued. Do you want them removed from active duty? Yes. Effective immediately. None of them will operate this flight. Jason's lips parted. Am I fired? His voice sounded younger now. Adrian looked at him. Not today. Jason swallowed. But you will answer for what you did. More importantly, you will need to understand why you did it. That landed harder than anger. Melissa closed her eyes. Thomas looked toward Officer Daniel, then back at Adrian. Mr. Cole, the schedule, the passengers, the crew replacement process. This will create a major delay. Adrian looked at him steadily. You were willing to delay the flight to remove a passenger with a valid ticket. Thomas's jaw tightened. Do not ask me to value the schedule now that accountability has become inconvenient. Facts mattered, not just for legal reports. For the moment, people later tried to soften what they had done. Adrian turned toward the gate agent. Notify SAP captain that departure is paused. The gate agent nodded quickly back onto the jet bridge and stepped back onto the jet bridge. Thomas looked around the cabin, at the cameras, at the witnesses, at the uniform that no longer protected him from consequence. Adrian returned his attention to Evelyn. Every passenger on this aircraft should receive a written explanation and a travel credit. Provide a secure portal for witness statements. A quiet murmur passed through the cabin, not because of the credit, because someone with power had finally treated the witnesses as people, not obstacles. Madison lowered her phone slightly. Her hands had stopped shaking. Adrian looked at her. You did the right thing. Madison swallowed. I was scared. That does not make it less brave. Her eyes filled again. The cabin door remained open. Cold air moved in from the jet bridge. Thomas stood surrounded by the people he had tried to silence and stood before them in stained jeans holding a damaged boarding pass. He looked nothing like the image of power they had expected. That was the lesson. Power did not always enter wearing a suit. Dignity did not always speak loudly. And respect should never depend on recognizing the person in front of you. Captain Michael Turner appeared at the cockpit door a few minutes later. He was 58, silver-haired, with the upright posture of a man who had spent most of his life responsible for other people's safety. He looked first at the two officers, then at the passengers holding phones, then at his own cabin crew, standing his own galley. Recognition moved across his face. Slowly he saw Adrian. Recognition moved across his face. Mr. Cole. Then all at once, Mr. Cole. The name was enough. A few passengers exchanged looks. Thomas lowered his eyes. Rachel pressed her lips together as if trying to hold back another wave of emotion. Captain Turner stepped into the aisle. Sir, I was told there was a passenger dispute. Officer Daniel Brooks answered before anyone else could shape the story. A passenger with a valid first-class ticket was challenged by another passenger who was sitting in his assigned seat. The crew verified the ticket, but security was still called on him. The captain's jaw tightened. He looked toward Thomas. Is that accurate? Thomas took a breath. There were concerns about cooperation and disruption. Daniel's voice remained calm. The man was standing beside his assigned seat. He had not threatened anyone. Multiple witnesses recorded the incident. Captain Turner looked at Adrian's stained jeans, then at the bent boarding pass in his hand. Mr. Cole, I apologize. Adrian held his gaze. Not yet. The captain paused. Adrian's voice stayed controlled. An apology before the facts are documented can become a way to move past the harm without understanding it. Captain Turner nodded once. Understood. The answer was simple. That mattered. Adrian turned toward Thomas, Rachel, Jason, and Melissa. You will step off the aircraft with Officers Brooks and Kim. You will write separate statements before leaving the airport. Do not discuss the incident with one another until those statements are complete. Thomas looked at Officer Hannah Kim. Are we being detained? No, Hannah said. You are being escorted to the area at your employer's quest. Any more formal investigation? Jason swallowed. This. Rachel's eyes remained on Adrian. I truly am sorry, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then let that be the beginning of something better. Her breath caught. Not the end of your discomfort. Rachel nodded. The words reached deeper than punishment. Sorry was easy when consequences had already arrived. Growth required carrying the lesson after the room stopped watching. The 4 crew members began moving toward the aircraft door. Thomas went first. His shoulders were stiff. The confidence he had worn earlier seemed too heavy now. Rachel followed with her eyes lowered. Jason walked behind her, no longer eager to prove anything. Melissa came last. Before stepping onto the jet bridge, she stopped and looked back at Adrian. I thought I was protecting the crew, she said. Adrian's expression softened slightly. Protecting people does not mean protecting every decision they make. Melissa looked down. Sometimes respect requires stopping the people beside us before they cause more harm. She nodded once and left the aircraft. No one applauded. The silence was better. This was not entertainment. It was consequence. Victoria's held tightly in seat 2C, her purse held tightly against her body. For most of her adult life, she had known how to recover from discomfort. A smooth apology at a dinner table. A donation after a careless remark. A smile that suggested everyone should move on. But this were witnesses. There was video, and the man she had humiliated was now standing a few feet away, not shouting, not threatening, not giving her the anger she could use to defend herself. He kept a respectful distance. Miss Langley. She looked up. For the first time since the confrontation began, she did not interrupt. You put your hand on me, Adrian said. You took my boarding pass. You spilled coffee on me. You said people like me belong in economy. Victoria's fingers tightened around the handle of her purse. I was upset. Adrian waited. The cabin waited with him. She shifted in her seat. I thought there was been a mistake. 'Cause of what? Her eyes moved toward the window. Adrian did not raise his voice. He did not repeat the question. Silence did the work for him. Victoria looked back at him. Because you were sitting in the seat I expected to have. It was never your seat. She flinched. The truth was no longer complicated. This was not a computer error. It was not a seating preference. It was a woman seeing a black man in a premium space and deciding the space must be wrong. Adrian took out his phone. Victoria stiffened. I am not calling your employer, he said. Her expression changed immediately. Fear revealed where her mind had gone first. You are worried about your reputation before you are worried about the harm. Victoria's eyes filled. The sentence found its mark, Setfit. I am sorry, she whispered. Adrian studied her. For what? She blinked. It was the question people avoided because a real apology had to name the wound. I am sorry for the misunderstanding. No. His voice was quiet. That is not what happened. Victoria's breathing became uneven. I am sorry I touched you. Adrian remained still. I am sorry I took your boarding pass. He waited. I am sorry I spilled the coffee. The cabin was silent enough to hear the soft hum of the ventilation system. Victoria looked down at her hands. And I am sorry I assumed you were in the wrong place because of how you looked. Adrian's face did not change, and her mouth trembled because the words count broken. No one moved. There was no satisfaction in the cabin, only truth. Adrian nodded once. Victoria wiped beneath one eye with the tip of her finger. What happens now? That depends on what you do next. Her face tightened again. Going to sue me? I have that right, Adrian said. I also have the right to file a police report for unwanted physical contact. Victoria closed her eyes. Adrian continued. But punishment alone does not always repair what was broken. She opened her eyes. You will provide a written statement before leaving the airport. You will describe what you did without blaming the crew, the system, or me. She nodded quickly. You will apologize to the passengers who witnessed this, in your own words. Not through a lawyer, yes. You will also complete a restorative education program through a civil rights organization of your choice. Victoria's voice was small. I will. Adrian held her gaze, and if you later present yourself as the victim of public humiliation, the record will answer you. She nodded again, this time more slowly. Across the aisle, Madison lowered her phone. She had expected revenge. What she saw was harder. Cleaner Adrian was not letting Victoria escape the truth, but he was also refusing to become cruel simply because cruelty was now available to him. That was the difference between power and character. Power could force someone to suffer. Character asked whether the suffering would teach anything. Captain Turner stood quietly near the front of the cabin. He had watched every moment. Mr. Cole, he said. The replacement crew is on the way. Adrian looked toward the open door. Cold air moved through the cabin. The flight was delayed. Passion, tirelessly missed it. Nothing about the moment standing victorious. But the truth was now standing in the open. And for the first time that morning, no one was trying to move it out of the way. Angela Foster entered the aircraft with 3 replacement crew members behind her. She was 54, tall, composed, and dressed in the same Navy uniform Rachel had worn, but the similarity ended there. Angela's eyes moved through the cabin slowly. She saw the officers, the coffee stain on Adrian's jeans. Thick, pale face. She did not begin with procedure. She began with people, Mist. Cole, she said, stopping a respectful distance away. Are you injured? Adrian looked down at the dark stain across his thigh. The coffee was hot. The pain has passed. Angela nodded, but did not dismiss it. I will arrange medical documentation and a change of clothing before departure. Then she turned toward the passengers. My name is Angela Foster. I will be leading the replacement cabin crew. Before we continue, we need to reset this aircraft properly. Her voice carried through first class and into the rows beyond. Not loud, clear, human. We will not ask anyone to pretend nothing happened. A silence followed. Several passengers lowered their phones. Captain Turner watched Angela with quiet relief. She was doing what experienced leaders did in moments of failure. She was not trying to erase discomfort. She was giving it structure. Officer Hannah Kim stepped toward Adrian. We have enough information for an initial report, she said. We will collect the video files through the airport evidence portal. No one needs to surrender a phone. Madison released a breath she had been holding. Will my name become public, she asked. Hannah looked at her carefully. Not through our report unless required by law. You are a witness, not a suspect. Madison nodded. Her shoulders lowered for the first time. Adrian noticed. Fear often stayed in the body after the danger had changed. A shaking hand, a tight jaw, a breath that would not deepen. Healing sometimes began when someone in authority used that authority to make another person feel safe. Angela turned toward Victoria. Miss Langley, I understand you wish to make a statement. Victoria looked around the cabin. The confidence she had carried onto the aircraft was gone. In its place was something less polished and more honest, fear, shame. Perhaps the beginning of understanding test. She stood slowly from seat 2C, sans the strap of her purse. Yes, but per hands. Dang. I would like to apologize, she said. Her voice barely reached the second row. Angela did not rescue her. Please speak clearly enough for the people affected to hear you. Victoria swallowed. She looked at Adrian, then at the passengers. I was wrong. The words sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. I sat in a seat that was not assigned to me. When Mr. Cole asked me to move, I judged him by his appearance instead of checking my own boarding pass. She paused. No one moved. I took his ticket without permission. Eyes caused coffee to spill on him. I said things that were cruel and racist. Her voice cracked on the final word. Racist. Not unfortunate. Not insensitive. Not misunderstood the actual word. Victoria looked down. I also tried to make myself seem like the victim after I caused the problem. A few passengers exchanged glances. The woman in the red scarf folded her hands in her lap. Victoria continued. I am sorry to Mr. Cole. I am sorry to the passengers who had to witness this. And I am sorry that I expected the crew to protect me from the consequences of my own behavior. Adrian watched her closely. He did not smile. He did not offer immediate forgiveness. Forgiveness given too quickly could become another way to comfort the person who caused the harm. Thank you for being specific, he said. Victoria looked at him with wet eyes. Do you forgive me? The cabin tightened again. Adrian took a slow breath. That is not something you are entitled to receive on your schedule. The answer was gentle, but firm. Victoria nodded. A tear moved down her cheek. Adrian continued, an apology is not a transaction. You do not say the correct words and receive relief in return. She looked down. You live differently afterward. That is how the apology becomes real. Victoria sat back down. This time, no one looked at her with triumph. The moment was too serious for that. Angela asked the passengers to remain seated while the new crew inspected the cabin. She personally removed the fallen coffee cup, replaced the wet newspaper, and brought Adrian a cold compress wrapped in a clean cloth. You should have been offered care immediately, she said. Adrian accepted it. Thank you, she met his eyes. I have worked for this airline for 27 years. I know good people here. I also know good people can become careless when they stop questioning their instincts. Adrian pressed the compress against his leg. Experience does not remove bias. No, Angela said. Sometimes it only makes bias faster. He studied her. That was the first honest sense he had from an employee all morning that did not toward pressure. Angela looked company. If we want this company to improve, training cannot be treated as punishment. It has to become part of how we practice the job. Adrian nodded, agreed. His phone vibrated again. Evelyn had sent him a draft emergency notice for senior leadership. The message listed immediate actions: independent review, preservation of evidence, passenger support, crew representation, temporary suspension of involved employees. Public acknowledgement after the facts were verified. Adrian read each line. Then he added one more. No employee will use safety language to punish passenger for requesting fair treatment. He sent the revised notice. Within seconds, executives across the country began receiving it. At airports in Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, and New York, senior managers looked down at their phones and realized the incident was no longer confined to one aircraft. It had become a test of the entire company. Captain Turner approached Adrian. The replacement crew has completed the safety checks. We can resume boarding when you authorize it. Adrian looked toward the open cabin door. Passengers were still waiting on the jet bridge. Families, business travelers, older couples, people with connections to make and lives waiting at the other end. He did not want the lesson to become another kind of harm. Resume boarding, he said, but no one rushes. Captain Turner nodded. And the departure? When the reports are started. When the passengers understand what happens next. Angela stepped toward the intercom. Before she spoke, Adrian stood. He turned in toward the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, you did not ask to become part of this. Every face turned toward him. More than that, I am sorry this a failure. What? That many people in this country recognize too quickly. Madison held her phone down now. She was no longer recording, she was listening. Adrian's voice carried without strain. A ticket should not become believable only after someone reveals wealth, status, or power. A person should not have to prove importance before receiving dignity. He looked across the cabin. Thank you to those who recorded. And to those who almost remained silent, remember how close this came to ending differently. The older man in the navy blazer nodded slowly. Adrian looked toward seat 1A. The seat waited. Empty. But it no longer looked like a prize. It looked like evidence. He sat down carefully. His boarding pass was bent. His clothes were stained. His body was tired. But his dignity had never moved. Angela's voice came over the intercom. We are ready to begin again, and this time, the cabin understood that beginning again did not mean forgetting. The cabin door closed with a firm mechanical click. This time, no one flinched. The sound did not feel like a threat, it felt like a boundary. What had happened was now contained inside the aircraft, but it was no longer hidden. Angela Foster moved through the first-class CAF with steady purpose. She checked seatbelts, she confirmed overhead bins. She spoke to each passenger as a person, not a task. When she reached Madison, she paused. Are you comfortable continuing on this flight? Madison looked up from her phone. Yes, ma'am, you can step off if you need time. Madison shook her head. I want to stay. Angela studied her for a moment. Then stay because you choose to, not because you feel responsible for what happens next. Madison nodded. The words settled something inside her. For the past hour, she had felt as if lowering her phone might cause the truth to disappear. Now she understood that courage did not mean carrying the entire weight alone. Across the aisle, Walter Hayes adjusted his navy blazer and looked toward Adrian. "You handled that with more patience than I would have." Adrian gave a tired breath. "I do not know if it was patience. What was it?" "Practice." Walter's expression changed. He understood. Some people learned emotional control through leadership courses. Others learned it because the world punished them more severely for losing it. Walter looked down at his folded newspaper. "I should have spoken sooner." Adrian turned toward him. "You spoke not at first. No one gets to change the first moment." Adrian's voice softened. "But we can still choose the next one." Walter nodded slowly. His wife, Margaret, reached across the space between their seats and placed a hand on his arm. For them, the lesson felt personal. They had lived long enough to remember public spaces where silence was expected, restaurants where people looked away, offices where jokes were allowed to pass, neighborhood meetings where someone's dignity became less important than keeping the room comfortable. Age had not made them innocent, but it had given them enough memory to recognize the cost of waiting. Captain Turner's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Turner. We have completed the required crew change and safety review. We expect to push short." He paused. The cabin waited. What occurred during boarding did not meet its of Sterling Crown Airlines. More importantly, it did not meet the standard of basic human decency. Victoria lowered her eyes. Adrian looked toward the cockpit door. The captain continued. "We will not use the delay as an excuse to rush the remainder of this process. We will depart only when the cabin is ready and every required report has met and initiated. No polished corpse. No attempt to call it a misunderstanding." The passengers listened in silence. It was better than applause. Angela brought Adrian a sealed bottle of water and a fresh cloth. "We found a pair of travel pants in the airport retail stock," she said. "They are not perfect, but they should fit." Adrian looked at the small garment bag in her hand. "You did not have to do that personally." "Yes, I did." Her answer was immediate. "The first response you received was to question whether you belong. The next response should be to restore what can be restored." Adrian accepted the bag. "Thank you." He changed in the first-class lavatory while the cabin remained quiet. When he returned, the stained jeans were folded inside a plastic evidence bag by Officer Kim's, a cabin. The physical burn had faded. The emotional residue had not. Adrian knew it would remain after the flight. In the shower that night. In the next airport lounge. In the small pause before sitting down in another premium seat. Humiliation had a way of staying in the body after the room moved on. He sat in 1A and opened his laptop. A blank company message waited on the screen. He placed his hands on the keyboard. Then he stopped. Evelyn called again. "Adrian, the board is assembled. Put them through." A row of executive faces appeared on the screen. Men and women in offices across the country. Some looked angry, some looked afraid. All of them knew the incident had already reached social media. Board Chair Rebecca Shaw spoke first. "We have reviewed the preliminary video." Adrian kept his voice low. "Then you know this was not one employee making one poor decision." Rebecca nodded. "The escalation involved multiple people and multiple opportunities to stop." A senior operations officer leaned toward his camera. "We should prepare a public response before the video spreads further." Adrian's eyes hardened. "The video has already spread, yes, but we need to manage the narrative." "No," the word cut through the call. "We need to spoke," Adrian continued. "This cannot become a public relations exercise. Not first. We verify the facts. We support the witnesses. We protect the integrity of the investigation. Then we speak plainly." Rebecca folded her hands. "What immediate measures do you want?" "At Madison." Adrian looked around the cabin. "At Masserson." "At Walter and Margaret." At Victoria, her statement with shaking fingers. At Angela, moving through the aisle. "Effective immediately. Every seating dispute involving identity, status, or suspected fraud must be verified through the reservation system before a passenger is moved." The executives began taking notes. "Security may not be called solely because a passenger asks for documentation, names discrimination, or requests a supervisor." The operations officer nodded. "We can draft that. Do more than draft it." Adrian's voice sharpened. "Make it operational. Train it. Audit it." Discipline violations consistently. Rebecca looked at him. What about bias training, mandatory? But not as a video employees clicked through while answering email. He leaned back. Live scenarios. Independent instructors. Passenger advocates. Anonymous testing. Review of complaint patterns by route and crew. The legal director spoke. That was be expensive. Adrian looked at her. So is discrimination. The sentence silenced the call. He continued. Create an independent dignity response team. Every discrimination complaint receives review within 24 hours. No complaint closes solely because an employee says they felt unsafe. Evelyn's voice came through. We will need standards for evaluating safety claims. Yes, specific conduct, specific words, specific actions, not discomfort, not tone, not appearance. Rebecca nodded. And the company message? Adrian looked down at the blank page. I will write it. He ended the call. For several seconds, his fingers rested above the keys. Then he began. Every passenger must be treated as a person before being treated as a problem. He paused. Documentation must be verified before assumptions are made. Another pause. Security must never be used to protect embarrassment, punish disagreement, or enforce bias. His hands moved faster now. Respect is not a reward for wealth, status, clothing, race, or recognition. He stopped at the final line. The cabin around him was preparing for departure. Seat belts clicked. Air vents whispered. The engines deepened into a low vibration beneath the floor. Adrian typed the last sentence. Respect is not a premium service. It is the standard. He read it once, then sent it to every employee in Sterling Crown Airlines. Across the country, thousands of phones and computers received the message. In break rooms, at ticket counters, inside crew lounges, in executive offices. Some employees read it with pride, some with discomfort, some with fear. But no one could say leadership had remained silent. Angela took her position near the galley. Captain Turner received clearance from the ground crew. The aircraft began to move. Adrian looked out the window as the jet bridge pulled away. The gate grew smaller. The terminal slid past. He had reclaimed his seat. But the seat had never been the real victory. The real test was what happened after power revealed itself. Whether it punished, whether it protected, whether it changed anything. The aircraft turned toward the runway, and Sterling Crown Airlines Pan-Mikamas began not to understand where. It could no longer pretend not to understand. The aircraft climbed through a layer of gray cloud, and the city disappeared beneath them. Inside the cabin, the engines settled into a steady hum. Trays remained locked. Seatbelts stayed fastened. No one spoke above a whisper. Adrian looked out the window. For the first time since boarding, no one was asking him to prove where he belonged. His phone vibrated on the armrest. A message from Evelyn appeared. The passenger videos are now with legal. The board has approved an independent investigation. The crew members remain on paid administrative leave. Airport police have documented the physical contact. Adrian read the message twice, then he placed phone face down. Justice did not arrive with applause. It arrived through records, statements, timelines, attached. That was how truth survived after emotion faded. Across the aisle, Madison sat with both hands wrapped around a cup of water. Her phone was off now. The live stream had ended before takeoff, but clips were already spreading across the country. She had seen the numbers climb, tens of thousands of views. Then more. News accounts had begun sharing the video. Civil rights attorneys were asking questions. Former airline employees were describing similar incidents in the comments. Madison looked toward Adrian. Do you think I made things worse by posting it? Adrian turned from the window. No, she swallowed. What if people come after me? They might. Her face tightened. He did not soften the truth. But you will not down at the cup. The company will provide legal support if anyone threatens you because documented what happened. You would do that? You were a witness on my aircraft. His voice was calm. That makes your safety my responsibility. Madison nodded slowly. Courage meant being fearless. 4 years she had believed courage meant being fearless. Now she understood it could also mean being protected after choosing to speak. Walter Hayes leaned across the aisle. Mr. Cole, I owe you an apology too. Adrian looked at him. Walter's wife, Margaret, turned toward her husband. Walter folded his hands over his stomach. I saw what was happening before I said anything. You eventually spoke. I almost did not. Adrian waited. Walter looked toward the dark window. When Isa was younger, I told myself staying quiet kept peace. At work, at church, at family dinners. His voice grew rough. Looking back, I think I confused peace with comfort. Margaret squeezed his hand. Adrian nodded. A lot of people do. Walter looked back at him. I do not want to be that man anymore. Adrian's expression softened. Then do not be. It was not forgiveness offered from above. It was an invitation forward. Near seat 2C, Victoria remained bent over her phone, her statement. She had started 3 times and deleted each version. The first sounded defensive, second, polished. The third began with the truth. I saw a black man in a seat I wanted, and I assumed he did not belong there. She stopped typing. Her hands shook. There was no elegant way to write it, no language that made it smaller, no sentence that protected the image she had carried of herself for decades. She looked toward Adrian. He was speaking quietly with Walter. He was not watching her suffer. That hurt in a different way. She had expected humiliation in return, a public attack, a demand for revenge. Instead, he had left her alone with the truth. Victoria understood then that accountability was not someone else making you feel small. It was finally seeing the size of what you had done. Angela Foster moved down the aisle and stopped beside her. Are you ready to submit your statement? Victoria shook her head. Not yet. Angela glanced at the screen. You do not have to make yourself sound better. Victoria looked up. Angela's voice remained steady. You only have to make the record honest. Victoria breathed in. Then she began again. At the front of the cabin, Captain Turner received a secure message from operations. The airlines board had issued a temporary system-wide directive. No passenger could be moved from a ticketed premium seat based solely on another customer's preference. All disputed seat assignments had to be digitally verified. Any call to security involving alleged noncompliance required a written description of the actual conduct. Not attitude, not tone, not discomfort, conduct. Captain Turner read the directive over the intercom. Every passenger listened. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. The change was immediate, not complete, but real. By the time the aircraft leveled above the clouds, Sterling Crown Airlines had announced an independent review led by an outside civil rights firm. The company created a direct reporting line for passengers and employees. Training records would be audited. Complaint patterns would be reviewed by airport, route, and supervisor. Thomas, Rachel, Jason, Lucinda, and Melissa would not be publicly condemned before the investigation ended. But neither would their choices be hidden. That balance mattered to Adrian. Truth without fairness became vengeance. Fairness without truth became protection for the powerful. He wanted neither. Hours later, the aircraft began its descent. Sunlight broke across the wing. The cabin glowed gold. Victoria finished her statement and sent it through the secure portal. Then she wrote a second message. This one was addressed to Adrian. She did not ask for forgiveness, did not explain her stress. She did not mention her status. She wrote that she would complete the restorative program. She would cooperate with police. She would not challenge the video or blame the crew. Adrian read it. Then, he typed one sentence. Let your next choices prove your words. When the plane touched down, the wheels struck the runway with a deep, solid roar. No one applauded. The passengers simply breathed. At the gate, representatives from legal, customer care, and airport operations were waiting. Madison was escorted privately to avoid reporters. Victoria left with an officer to complete the incident report. Adrian remained in seat 1A until the cabin was nearly empty. Angela stood near the door. Are you ready, sir? Adrian looked at the station boardings pass in his hand. The paper was bent. The ink had blurred near the edge, but the seat number was still visible, 1A. He folded it once and placed it inside his jacket. Yes, he said. He stood and walked toward the door. The flight had not fixed every bicycle inside the airline. One investigation would not heal every passenger who had been doubted, moved, silenced, or removed. But the truth had been recorded. The people responsible would answer for their choices, and the company would change because one man refused to let power protect itself. Adrian stepped onto the jet bridge. Behind him, the empty seat remained in the soft cabin light. It had never been about luxury. It had been about dignity. And dignity should never depend on someone discovering that the person they disrespected has the power to punish them. If this story reminds you of a moment when someone was judged before being heard, Do not let that memory spam it. Speak about it. Stand beside the person being isolated. Ask for the facts before accepting the easiest story. Sometimes justice begins with a powerful person taking action, but more often it begins with an ordinary witness who decides not to look away.